What if the biggest thing holding your organization back isn't lack of talent, resources, or even strategy, but the way you work every single day? Right now, while you're sitting here, companies across the world are moving faster, adapting quicker, and delivering better results. Not because they're smarter, but because they've learned how to work differently. They've embraced a system that turns chaos into clarity, pressure into progress, and ideas into real, measurable outcomes. That system is Scrum. And here's the urgency. If your organization doesn't learn how to apply Scrum effectively, you're not just standing still, you're falling behind. Because in today's world, speed matters, adaptability matters, execution matters. And Scrum is not just a framework, it's a mindset shift that separates organizations that survive from those that lead. So today is not about theory, it's about transformation. Control feels safe, but it quietly kills ownership. In many organizations, especially those led by men who were taught to equate control with strength, managing every detail becomes a way to prove value. From a man's perspective, control often feels like responsibility, like protection. But from a woman's perspective, and even from the team's collective experience, it can feel like mistrust. And where there is no trust, there is no true performance. Empowerment, on the other hand, demands vulnerability. It asks leaders, men and women alike, to step back and say, I trust you to figure this out. For men, this can challenge deep instincts tied to identity and authority. For women, it often creates space where their voices, ideas, and leadership styles can finally surface without resistance. Scrum thrives in this space, where authority is replaced with accountability and direction is replaced with shared purpose. High-performing teams are not built by commanding outcomes, but by creating conditions where people choose to rise. When individuals feel seen, trusted, and responsible, they don't just complete tasks, they take ownership. And ownership is where speed, innovation, and real transformation begin. Planning feels productive, but too much of it becomes a hiding place. In many organizations, especially among men who are conditioned to seek certainty before action, planning turns into a shield against failure. From a man's perspective, a perfect plan signals competence and control. But from a woman's perspective, and often from the team's reality, it can feel like delay, like hesitation, dressed up as strategy. And while everyone waits for perfection, nothing meaningful actually moves forward. Execution, by contrast, requires courage over certainty. It demands the willingness to act before all the answers are known. For men, this can challenge the internal pressure to always get it right. For women, it often opens a door to contribute in real time, where adaptability and collaboration become strengths rather than afterthoughts. Scrum creates a rhythm where action is prioritized over overthinking, where progress is measured in doing, not just discussing. Momentum is built in motion, not in meetings. When teams shift from endless planning to short, focused execution cycles, they begin to see results faster, learn quicker, and adjust with purpose. And in that cycle of action and feedback, confidence replaces doubt, and progress becomes impossible to ignore. Secrecy feels powerful, but it quietly weakens the team. In many organizations, especially among men raised to associate strength with control of information, holding back details can feel like maintaining authority. From a man's perspective, knowing more than others can feel like staying ahead. But from a woman's perspective, and from the broader team dynamic, it often feels like exclusion, like being denied the full picture needed to contribute meaningfully. And when people don't see clearly, they don't act confidently. Transparency, by contrast, demands honesty over image. It requires leaders to show not just the wins, but the uncertainties, the risks, and the real state of progress. For men, this can challenge the instinct to appear always in control. For women, it often creates an environment where communication becomes open, collaborative, and grounded in trust. Scrum builds on this openness, making work visible so that everyone moves with the same understanding, not assumptions. Clarity fuels speed in ways control never can. When teams see what's happening, where they stand, and what matters most, they stop guessing and start aligning. And in that shared visibility, decisions happen faster, collaboration deepens, and performance rises without force. Failure feels like a threat, but it's actually information. In many organizations, especially among men conditioned to tie self-worth to success, failure is something to avoid, hide, or delay. From a man's perspective, failing can feel like losing status or credibility. But from a woman's perspective, and often within the team dynamic, it can feel like an opportunity being missed because unspoken mistakes cannot be improved. And when failure is buried, growth is buried with it. Feedback, on the other hand, requires openness and speed. It asks teams to look directly at what didn't work and respond without ego. For men, this can challenge the instinct to defend or justify. For women, it often creates space for dialogue, reflection, and shared learning. Scrum builds this into the rhythm of work, where short cycles force teams to face reality quickly and adapt without delay. Progress accelerates when failure is no longer feared but used. When teams learn to convert mistakes into immediate insights, they stop repeating the same patterns and start evolving in real time. And in that shift, resilience replaces hesitation, and improvement becomes part of the culture, rather than a reaction to crisis. Big wins are inspiring, but they are too far apart to sustain belief. In many organizations, especially among men who are driven by outcomes and taught to chase significant victories, there is a tendency to focus only on the end goal. From a man's perspective, the bigger the win, the greater the proof of capability. But from a woman's perspective, and often within the rhythm of a team, waiting for one massive result can feel exhausting and disconnected from daily effort. And when progress isn't visible, motivation quietly fades. Small wins, by contrast, create evidence that effort matters. They bring progress into the present moment. For men, this can challenge the instinct to overlook anything that doesn't feel big enough. For our women, it often reinforces a sense of contribution, where consistent effort is recognized and valued. Scrum is built around this principle, breaking work into short cycles where every completed piece becomes a visible step forward, not just a task checked off. Momentum is not built in leaps, but in layers. When teams consistently achieve small, meaningful outcomes, they begin to build confidence that compounds over time. Energy rises, focus sharpens, and people start to see that progress is not something distant, but something happening now. And in that steady rhythm of achievement, belief grows stronger. Collaboration deepens, and performance begins to accelerate without forcing it. Processes feel safe because they are predictable, but culture is what determines behavior when no one is watching. In many organizations, especially those led by men who were taught to value structure, rules, and control, adopting Scrum can look like installing a new system to manage work. From a man's perspective, a process provides order and clarity. But from a woman's perspective, and from the deeper reality of how teams function, a process without cultural alignment feels hollow, like following steps without meaning. And when people follow rules without belief, nothing truly changes. Culture, by contrast, demands a shift in how people think, not just what they do. It asks leaders to move from authority to trust, from control to collaboration. For men, this can challenge long-held ideas about leadership being tied to direction and dominance. For women, it often creates an environment where empathy, communication, and shared ownership are no longer secondary, but essential. Scrum only works when people begin to see each other not as roles, but as contributors with equal responsibility for outcomes. Change becomes real when behaviors align with beliefs. When teams start to communicate, Penley, take ownership without being asked, and adapt without waiting for permission. Scrum stops being something they use and becomes something they live. For men, this can mean redefining strength as the ability to empower rather than control. For women, it often means stepping fully into influence without resistance or limitation. Sustainable performance is never driven by tools alone. It is driven by a shared mindset where trust replaces fear, accountability replaces blame, and progress becomes a collective responsibility carried by everyone in the room.